scary stories.
So this happened in 2000, when I was like 13 or 14, but my aunt only told me the full story recently, and it's absolutely terrifying. When I was a teenager, my favorite aunt used to pick me up after school to babysit her 3 boys while she went to work part-time. She'd recently separated from her husband, so I was helping out pretty much every day at this point. We had a routine. We'd eat dinner and play in the yard until the sun went down, but one day she told me not to take the boys out at all. She then launched into this whole safety lecture, and I thought it was weird. Fast forward about a week and I come over one day to a security company installing an alarm system in the house. My aunt tells me to come in the kitchen. She tells me that for weeks she's been finding cigarette butts and food wrappers in the bushes, and that she heard a cough in the bushes, so she went outside to investigate. She found a guy squatting there, face pressed against the window, and proceeded to lose her shit. He snarled at her and said,
"Bitch, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking for that pretty babysitter of yours,"
before running off. She called the police, but they didn't catch him and kept patrolling the neighborhood for a while after. Eventually she calmed down and things returned to normal. We were allowed to play in the yard again after a few weeks, and I forgot all about it. Last week the story came up at a family barbecue, and my aunt got really quiet and pale. She said that there was more to the story, and since I'm 30 now, I should probably hear the rest. It turns out, a guy matching the description she had given the cops was arrested about a week later for assaulting a teenage girl in an apartment complex 1 block from her house. It's terrifying to think this piece of shit excuse for a human had been watching me for who knows how long, and what he was planning to do, and what he did to someone else. So it happened quite a few years ago, maybe around 2013 or 2014. That's when I changed my entire style. I started wearing t-shirts with shorts and slightly more makeup, natural skater kind of look. So I was at the mall with my mom, and she wanted to check out this one clothes shop. It wasn't really my taste, so I asked her if I could go get some bubble tea. She gave me some money, and I went all the way down to the 1st floor from the 3rd floor. Everything was okay so far. There were families around, little kids occasionally looking at me because of my skin tone, but I don't mind. I went to go get some bubble tea for my mom and I, and slowly heading back up to the 3rd floor where my mom was at. When I was almost at the shop, these 3 guys said, "How are you?" in the most laziest and effortless English ever, then proceeded to laugh at me. I ignored them because I didn't know who they were, and I thought that they were just bullying me because I'm a different skin tone. Then I heard them say amongst themselves in their own language, "She's rude. Never even say hi back. What kind of people is this?" I kept walking to the shop, then I noticed the 3 guys were following me. I got paranoid and decided to walk around the floor, basically 1 round around the floor before heading back to the shop. Then I noticed they were following me all the way, so I started running into the shop as quick as possible. I told my mom there were 3 guys stalking me, and she told me to stop overreacting, and that I was just paranoid. I couldn't stop shaking because I was scared. I looked out the shop and saw 3 guys standing outside the shop looking into it. I decided to hide deeper inside so they couldn't see me. Once my mom was done, she and I walked out, and she asked me where the guys were, and I told her that they were standing behind us. Then she told me that they were not doing anything, and I should stop overreacting. When they saw I was with my mom, they stopped stalking me and started minding their own business. The story that I am about to tell happened because I guess that I am too nice to people. When I was 17, I was a pretty blonde girl who was very nerdy. I would often get guys who wanted to be more than just friends when they found out I liked games and films, but they always just made their crushes known, and I would gently let them down. I had a high school boyfriend at the time. I worked at a movie theater in the Midwest. I loved this job and became good friends with the people I worked with. It was the perfect job for a teen who loved movies and needed to work after school. That was until I met Simon. Simon was a guy who worked at the theater with me. He seemed nice enough, a little geeky and not very attractive, but kinda just a regular guy, and I was friendly, as I always was. He was almost 10 years older than me, so I wasn't too worried about him thinking I wanted to be more than just friends. As time went on, he gave me more and more attention, talking to me for hours during the downtime when movies were playing. I suspected that he might like me, but I wasn't too worried as he was a manager and I wasn't, and dating between managers and staff was not allowed, so I thought he would just keep it to himself. Then after a year, I was asked to move to another theater as the one I worked at would be shutting down in a few months. I agreed, but I was the only member of the staff to be offered this option. I realize now that this was not as fortuitous as I thought it would be. Just a week after I started at the new theater, Simon showed up to say hi. I was friendly as always and was nice to him. After all, we were the same movie chain, so he would come here to watch movies for free if he wanted to. I thought it was innocent, but soon started to feel uncomfortable with all of the time Simon was spending hanging around at my theater. I asked my coworkers if he came in when I wasn't there, and they said no. Then it dawned on me that we no longer worked at the same theater, so he was free to pursue me romantically without worrying about his job. This made me worry as he started outwardly, if not awkwardly, flirting with me. I found out later that a girl at my job who didn't like me had given Simon a copy of my schedule for the next 2 months, so I started to hide. Every time I saw him, I would make some excuse to go and hide in the stockroom or the projection booth. It was starting to make me very uneasy. My boss, who's still a great friend to me, noticed how uncomfortable I was and told me if I wanted, I could report it to the home office to get him to stop. I thought this was taking it too far, and I declined, thinking eventually that he might give up. Well, he did not. He came in close to my birthday and dropped off a card and a CD with lots of rather creepy music on it. I had finally had enough and told my boss to report him. Management told me he wasn't allowed to come to my theater again, or he would be fired. I didn't see him for a few months. I thought it was over, but then I had people I worked with at the old theater who went to high school with me coming up to me in the halls and cussing me out for getting Simon in trouble. They said that I had led him on and that he was a lonely guy who had a crush, and it was cruel that I got him in trouble or that I wouldn't give him a chance. I was horrified that he had been spreading these rumors to people I thought were my friends and were now attacking me at school. I spent the next few months afraid to go anywhere. I lived in a small town and was terrified of going out in case I ran into him. I am generally a nervous person who scares easily, so my parents thought I was overreacting. My boss told me not to worry, and that Simon probably had given up on me. Oh, how I wish that had been true. The day the old theater closed down, I was at work. I had to work late, and me and my boss were the last ones to leave for the night. My boss, Peter, asked me to wait for him so we could lock up together. It was about 2 a.m. once we left. The doors had been locked since 10 p.m. No customers could get in. As we walked out, my boss, who had a kind of sick sense of humor, was joking about Simon and his crush on me, probably trying to make light of it to cheer me up. When we stepped outside, I turned to lock the door, and my boss shouts, "There he is!" I thought he was joking again, and turned to tell him it wasn't funny, but he wasn't joking. Simon was standing there, with just Peter between us. I froze. My entire body went rigid. I didn't know what to do.
I heard Simon say my name and saw he tried to get around my boss, but Peter spread his arms out and blocked him for me. I saw that his eyes were fixed on me. Peter told Simon to get out of here and that I didn't want to see him. I struggled to unlock the door, which was notoriously sticky to get open. I could hear Simon trying to get my attention, but I just focused on the lock. Finally, it gave way, and I rushed inside, running for the office, which had a deadbolt security door. I unlocked it and sat inside, hyperventilating. Peter came in and shut the door, checking I was okay. He told Simon to go home and not to come back, or he would call the cops. We sat in the office and waited for what seemed like forever. Peter then said that he would go and check out to make sure that he had left, and I stayed in the locked office. A few minutes go by and I hear Peter's voice telling me that he was coming back in. When he opened the door, he looked furious and headed straight for the phone. I asked what was going on, and he said that Simon was still out there. Apparently, he had parked in the shadow of the theater where it is hard to see. He parked in such a way that I would have had to walk past him to get into my car. He had parked his van, a van I didn't know he had in the shadows. Peter had found him crouched down beside the van, as if waiting for something, waiting for me to walk by. Peter had shouted he was calling the cops and ran back inside. By the time the cops showed up, he had left. They took a statement and Peter told them all Simon's contact information, as he was still in the system. We guessed he showed up today because he is no longer at risk of losing his job, as the theater had closed down. I never saw Simon again, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't terrified that I might run into him again. I spent the whole year until I moved away terrified I might run into him again. I never did, but it did ruin what should have been a great summer before I left for college. I hate to think what would have happened if my boss hadn't been there that night, or hadn't been smart enough to check that Simon had left. I am still good friends with Peter. He even came to my wedding. I owe him an unknown debt. And to Simon, wherever you are, let's not meet again.
I moved to a new town around 2 weeks ago. It is around 4 hours away from where I lived previously. I only knew 2 people who lived in this town, literally. I know no one. The 2 people are a couple who lived next door to me and my mom. On Friday, I received a message saying hi. I did not reply to it. It was from a number I did not recognize, and I am really not good with texting people back, so like I said, I did not reply. On Sunday, I received another message. I did not actually check my phone until Monday. Like I said, I am awful with it, and most of the time, it lives in the bottom of my bag. This one said, "I see you," and they had taken a picture of me walking down the street carrying shopping bags with my mom. They then sent another message saying, "I also saw you here too." This was a picture of me in a pub with the couple I know. After that, I was creeped out, obviously, so I sent them a message saying, "Who is this?" It can't be the couple, as they sat right next to me in the picture, and the photo had been taken from far away. Around 10 minutes later, I got a message from this person. They had taken another picture of me, but this time it was while I was eating food with the girl of the couple I know, and it said, "Did you enjoy your burger?" This time I said, "Who the fuck is this? This is creeping me out. Tell me who you are." They read my message but have not replied to it. I have phoned the number, and all I hear when I phone is a man breathing heavily. I think. I literally do not know what to do. Should I be scared? I have no idea how they got my number. What do I do? Do I go to the police and show them the creepy pictures? A few years ago, I had to fully rely on public transportation to get around anywhere. I had to catch the bus at around 3:34 a.m. That was about 3/4 of a mile from my house to get to work. The street I had to walk down was mostly residential, and what businesses were there were closed. Only dim street lights lit the road, so basically it was a quiet road with no one around and dim lighting. A bit of info on me. I am a woman and was in my mid-20s. Usually the walk went fine. I could get there fairly quickly. This particular morning, though, was not so fine. I got about halfway to the bus stop when I noticed a white car was parked across the street at a closed business. I couldn't tell how many people were in the car, or their gender or what, but it struck me as odd. I hoped that maybe it was a couple making out or something, but once I passed it, it turned out of the parking lot and drove past me. I did not like that, and I made sure to walk as far from the street as possible. He U-turned up ahead and slowly drove back the other way until he could U-turn again, then drive past me once more. He parked in another lot across the street and waited for me to pass. At this point I'm freaked out because if he decided he wanted to snatch me up, there would have been no witnesses whatsoever. I got my phone out and dialed 911, but didn't place the call right away. But when he pulled out again to drive past me, I made the call. At this point I have 911 on the phone, and he finally pulls out and rolls his window down. I should note that I am generally a pushover and too mild-mannered for my own good. I usually let a man talk to me even when I don't want them to, until I can find a way out. This time I was so scared that I would not let him say much. I thought he said, "You missed it," as in the bus, but you can see the bus stop from down the road where I started walking from, so I knew I hadn't missed it. I said, "No, no, no. No ride, no ride, no." And he kept saying, "Babe," or "Hey," over and over. But once he saw my phone lit up, he drove away. I hung up because the adrenaline was insane, and I needed to calm down. I had not actually talked to anyone. They called me back to make sure I was okay. I filled them in and told them I thought the guy was gone. He never did come back that I know of. Thankfully, the bus didn't run late that morning, and I made it safely to work. From that day on, I tried wearing clothes that didn't accent my curves. Once I got a car, I haven't looked back at public transportation or long walks in the dark. When I was 18, I got a job at Walmart. Small town, not much else there for someone fresh out of high school. I'd been there about a month and worked in the jewelry department, usually from mid-afternoon until the department closed at 9 p.m. I would close the department myself, but obviously Walmart is open 24 hours, so other people were always around. One night, I'm locking the cases up and putting things away, and an overnight stalker walks by and says hi. I look up, smile, and say hi back, then go about my business. This guy, the only way I can describe him is to say he looks like one of the Bee Gees. Shoulder-length, frizzy hair, kind of a bouncy hop to his step when he walked, mid-50s. This started to become a regular thing. On nights I closed by myself, he'd walk by and say hi, and I'd say hi back. That's it. No conversation ever took place. Then on my birthday, a few of my friends who worked there got me a cake, and I hugged them and said thank you, etc. About an hour later, Mr. Bee Gees comes around with a birthday card and gave it to my manager to give to me. My manager thought it was extremely funny that this weirdo got me a card, until I opened it. "Happy birthday. I saw you hugging those guys earlier. It made me really mad, but I called a friend and talked it out, and he made me realize you are allowed to have friends other than me. Just please don't hug them anymore. Save those hugs for me." I don't know what kind of emotion showed on my face, but my manager grabbed the card and read it, then walked me back to the store manager's office and showed it to him. The store manager said that he was obviously joking, but he would have a talk with him about it. I didn't see Mr. Bee Gees for around a week, until one night, When I was closing, he plunked down a stuffed envelope on my counter as he walked by without a word. Inside was 6 pages front to back of pure crazy. It was basically his entire life story, all about his family and schools he went to, but weird stuff, like how his sister was a psychic, and how his father was an exorcist, and all sorts of weirdness. The end of the letter was about how his friend was 18 months old, and he knew that something bad was happening because he could hear her screaming his name in his dreams. So this also went to the store manager, and he had me write a written complaint, and he told me not to go outside by myself and not to wander near where the guy might be while I'm out on my breaks. No, get rid of him. 2 nights later, I was finishing up for the night, and the way the counter is set up, is one opening and the counters go all the way around both sides. He brought a handcart around with boxes for my department into the only opening in the counters, so I was trapped inside. He just stood there and stared at me while I looked at him with what I'm sure was terror. I was then, and still am now, riddled with anxiety. I don't like confrontation, and the last thing I wanted was for this weirdo to confront me about me reporting him. Twice he whispers, "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." I turned around and started finishing my closing tasks, pretending he wasn't there, even though I could feel him watching me. After a few minutes, I just looked at him and said, "Weren't you told to stay away from me?" He gave me this gross predator grin and said he asked me if I was joking, and I told him I was. Then he leaned in as close as he could get with the counter between us and whispered, "But I'm not joking." Then he walked away. For 2 weeks after that, he would randomly show up wherever I was. I would leave for lunch. He would be there. Even non-work places. I would go to the mall. He would be there. Another department manager told me he had been reported by 4 other people over the last 2 years for very similar behavior. I again went to my store manager, who told me the guy was harmless and maybe had a little bit of a crush. He was in his 50s. I was 18 or 19 during this shit. A week later, I gave my notice and quit. He still works there, 13 years later. Still gives me the heebie-jeebies.